Okay, so we've seen how we have this root component right here, app.vue, and how it's rendered to the DOM so we see it in the browser. Now we've also got this component object right here, and this will control the functionality and the data of this component, the template inside this component. So much like before when we used the CDN to load Vue and store data and methods on our Vue instance, we can now add data and methods to this object right here. The only real difference is the data property right here is now a function which returns an object, whereas before it was just an object. So it looked something like this before. If we take off the return statement and the function, then it was just a data property which was an object and contained different properties. Now, why is it different? Why in this case do we have data as a function which returns an object? Well, basically it's here to protect our data. So imagine we create a component which will be used multiple times on a web page. For example, a component which renders a comment on a blog. Now we'd have multiple instances of those components, those comment components on the web page, because there might be 10 different comments. So it would be rendered several times. Now, if the data property wasn't a function and it was just an object, the data object in those components would be shared between each one. And we might not want that, since each instance of the component would need its own unique data. The comment text, the date of the comment, the author, etc. So by wrapping this data object in a function and then returning it right here, what we're doing is ensuring that each instance of a component has its own data object, which isn't shared between other instances. Because each time the component runs, we're returning a brand new object. Okay? So I realize this concept is a little hard to grasp at first, but it's something that you really don't even need to think about much. It's just a convention to do it this way. You just need to remember to wrap your return data object inside this kind of function. So now we know that, let's try outputting some data. First of all, what I'll do is delete all of this stuff up here. I want to get rid of all this. We'll leave the div with an ID of app to wrap our template here. But then what we'll do is create a different data property inside this object. So we'll call this one title, and we'll set it equal to my first Vue app. Woo! Smiley face. Alright, so let us now render this to the page. So we'll just say h1, not header, h1, and then output the title in curly braces. Much like we would before when we used the Vue CDN, we're doing exactly the same thing here. We're just creating data and outputting it to the template. We can also get rid of most of this style because we don't need that anymore. But what we will do is just style up the H1 so that it has a color of 444, which is a kind of deep gray, a font weight of normal, and text align to the center. Okay, so let's save this now and view it in a browser. And we notice that all of that other stuff has gone because we've removed it. And now we just get this H1, which is this thing right here, the title. Okay, so it's all kind of behaving the same way as it did before. We're still defining data here and we're outputting that data in the same way. It's just that now we're using this Vue file instead of directly creating our template here. And we're also using this function to wrap our data object. So they're the real only two differences in what we're doing so far.